All right, welcome back. We are getting started in Genesis chapter 32. After all this time being separated from his brother Esau, Jacob is now realizing that going home, he's coming face to face with the fact that it means he's going to have to see Esau in person. And Jacob is terrified of what that might mean. And so, Genesis chapter 32, we read about God reassuring Jacob through those fears he had of his brother Esau. Beginning in Genesis 32, verse 1, it says, "So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, 'This is God's camp.' And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Just as angels had appeared shortly after he left home, in Genesis 28, you remember God appeared to him, and he saw the angels ascending and descending there on the ladder. So now they appear again as Jacob is traveling home. So God is making it clear to Jacob that he is with him, and he has been with him the entire time. Now that word Mahanaim, it means two camps. It's likely a reference to God traveling with him, going with him on his journey. So it's the picture of Jacob had his camp, and God had set up camp, so to speak, next to or with Jacob. So he's going home, and God is showing Jacob, I am still with you. And then, back to our text, then Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, 'Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants. And I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight.' So just as God sends messengers to Jacob, so now Jacob sends messengers to Esau. Michael Whitworth, in his book on Genesis, The Epic of God, on this passage, he wrote this. He said, these angels were a reminder that God would protect his people, but they were also notice that Jacob needed to tend to unfinished business before meeting his brother. Jacob was attempting to reconcile with Esau, but he first needed to reconcile with his God, to wrestle and to come to grips with him. For too long, he had been shirking the Lord, holding him at arm's length. Until this chapter, there had been a distance between God and Jacob that had not existed between God and Jacob's fathers. So, this is a chapter where Jacob is going to have to come face to face, so to speak, with this distance that's existed between him and God up to this point in the book of Genesis. And so Jacob, on his way home, God reassures him that he is with him, and Jacob is done sneaking around behind Esau's back. He sends messengers to let Esau know that he is coming home. And no doubt, God reminding Jacob of his presence helped to give Jacob the confidence to do this. And it's interesting how Jacob spoke to his brother Esau. He refers to him as my lord Esau. He refers to himself as your servant Jacob. And now, under normal circumstances, twin brothers wouldn't speak to each other in this way. But as you remember from previous chapters and Jacob and Esau's dealings with one another, these are not normal circumstances. So Jacob here, not only is he attempting to soften Esau's violent anger, but he's also implying that now he has great wealth and he will share what he has with Esau, or perhaps he will pay him not to kill him. Remember, Jacob has cheated Esau in the past, and he is, perhaps in a subtle or not very subtle way, he's letting Esau know, I can repay you for what I cheated you out of. The Jacob, we're also noticing something, that the Jacob that is returning home is very different than the one who left. But the question is, Jacob appears to have changed, and for the better. Has Esau changed, though? That's the lingering question at this point. And that's the question that Jacob desperately wants to know the answer to as well. So Jacob sends these messengers, and then the text continues. Then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him." And so Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and the herds and camels into 2 companies. And he said, "If Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape." Jacob's messengers then, we read here, return with a message that terrified him. The message was, "Esau is coming to meet you with 400 men." Now, other places, especially in like the book of 1 Samuel, in 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 2, for example, and other places, 1 Samuel 25, verse 13, 1 Samuel 30, verse 10, 400 men appears to have been about the standard size of a militia. So Jacob takes this to mean that Esau is coming for a fight. Esau is coming with a number of men that is typically used for battles, for raids, for skirmishes like this. And so Jacob just assumes Esau is going to make good on the threat that he made a long time ago, wanting to kill me. He is coming to do that now, and he is going to make certain of it. And so Jacob divides his household and his animals into 2 groups. At least that way, some of his household might escape. So then at that point, after Jacob does that, the text says, "Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." So Jacob does what he can to save his family, but he throws himself before God for his mercy and protection. And Jacob's prayer focuses on 3 things. First of all, it focuses on the promises of God. Jacob knows the promises that God made to Abraham, that God made to his father Isaac, and that God had made to himself. And his prayer focuses on God's promises. His prayer, though, also focuses on the provision of God. In his prayer, he recognizes that God has been with him and has been providing for him all this time. He talks about how, I crossed over this river. I came to this strange land with just my staff. I had nothing, we might say, except the clothes on my back. And now you're bringing me back, and I'm 2 full companies and all of these, my family and all this wealth. He recognizes that God has been with him and has provided all this for him. And he freely admits that he deserves none of the mercy and the blessings that God has shown him. He focuses on God's promises, on God's provision, and then the prayer also focuses on the protection of God. And Jacob hides nothing. He admits, he's very open, that he is terrified of his brother and what Esau might do to Jacob's family. And so after this prayer, the text continues on. It says, "So he lodged there that same night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. Then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by itself, and said to his servants, Pass over before me, and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, To whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, They are your servants Jacob. It's your servant Jacob's, this who it belongs to. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us. And so he commanded the second and the third, and all who followed the droves, saying, In this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him, and also say, Behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. And so the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. Jacob sends a total of 550 animals to Esau, not counting the young. One writer by the name of Walton, in his commentary on Genesis, said that Jacob's gift was actually larger than towns were likely to pay in tribute to foreign kings. So this is a substantial gift that Jacob is offering to Esau, more than perhaps would have been paid in tribute by a nation to a king. And so Jacob is being extremely generous in what he is offering to Esau. And Jacob, he sends all these animals to Esau as a gift, as a present. And so he orders his servants to deliver them in at least 3 separate waves. And Jacob is hoping that this would appease the wrath of his brother, because Jacob still thinks that Esau wants to kill him, and that's why Esau is coming. And so then, after all of that preparation is made, the text says, he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. So Jacob puts a river between his family and Esau. And Jacob separates himself from his family and all his possessions. Perhaps Jacob was thinking, I'm the one Esau wants. Maybe once Esau deals with me, maybe he will leave my family alone once he has me. So Esau is doing everything he can to protect his family. It says, and then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said to Jacob, Let me go, for the day breaks. But he, Jacob, said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And so he said to Jacob, What is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked, saying, Tell me your name, I pray. And he said, Why is it that you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Now, a question arises from this section we just read. Who is this man, this individual that Jacob wrestles with? He is called a man throughout this section. In Genesis 32, verse 28 and verse 30, he is called God. Also, Hosea 12, verse 4 makes reference to this. And there he is called the angel in Hosea 12, 4. Now, the context of Hosea 12, verse 4 through 5 makes it clear that this individual is the Lord God of hosts. So when you take all of these descriptions together, man, God, angel, another way to think about angel could also be messenger. The evidence points to this being the one who John refers to in John 1 as the Word, the one who came to be known as Jesus, the Word made flesh who lived among us. I think, personally, this is just my opinion here, I think that's who this is. I believe this is God that Jacob is wrestling with, and specifically it is the Word, the one who would later be known as Jesus. Now, up to this point, Jacob has lived out the meaning of his name. Remember that Jacob's name means heel grabber or deceiver, and he has lived up to that meaning. Jacob has relied on himself his entire life, but this struggle is the moment where God confronts Jacob about his self-reliance. The Apostle Paul was also confronted with this in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7 through 10, when the Apostle Paul goes to God about the thorn in his flesh, whatever that was, and God confronts Paul about that as well. That this taught Paul to rely not upon himself, but upon God. Now, even in this situation, Jacob tries to gain something. He demands a blessing. And in response, Jacob is asked, well, what's your name? Of course, God knew, but Jacob needed to confess, I'm the heel grabber. I'm the deceiver. Jacob, here in this section, he finally comes face to face with his problem, with his sin. And it is at this point that he is blessed. His name is changed from Jacob to Israel, which the name Israel emphasizes power and strength. So, realize what happens here in this section. By coming to grips with his own weakness, Jacob places himself in the position to be blessed by God. And isn't that what Paul wrote by inspiration in 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10? When I am weak, then I am strong. At the close of this wrestling, Jacob is convinced that he has come face to face with God, and he is thankful to still be alive. And Michael Whitworth added on to that section. He said, if he could meet God this way and walk away, well, then he had nothing to fear from Esau. And so as the chapter ends, it says, just as he crossed over Peniel, the sun rose on him and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because God, touched the socket of Jacob's hip and the muscle that shrank. So for the rest of his life and the life of the nation that came from him, there was the constant reminder of the Lord of hosts and his care and his concern for them. I'd like us to think about a brief lesson from this chapter. I'd like us to think of the lengths that God will go to for you. Those great lengths that he will go to for you, it demonstrates how much he loves you. Let's think about Jacob here. Jacob had been refusing God's efforts to bring him into submission for most of his life. God reminded Jacob over and over that he cared for Jacob, that he was with him, that he was watching over him. Finally, in the section we just read here, God approaches Jacob and looks him in the eye and says, you need to face who you are and who you have become without me. Who are you, Jacob? Well, I'm the heel grabber. I'm the deceiver. God wants Jacob to come face to face with that truth, with that fact. Jacob could not receive the full extent of God's blessings until he faced who he truly was without God. Now, as we sort of turn that lesson and that application from Jacob to us, God has demonstrated his great love for us by sending Jesus to live among us as one of us and to die for us. John 1 verse 14, John 3 verse 16. We cannot enjoy the blessings of what Jesus has done for us unless we first face who we are without him. As Paul wrote in Romans chapter 3, verse 9 and 10, there is none righteous, no, not one. In verse 23 of Romans 3, all have sinned and have fallen short of the glory of God. The gospel is God's power to save, Romans 1:16, but we will not recognize our need for it unless we first realize that we need saving. And I think that this is where most people in the world are. They do not yet recognize their need for what God has done for them in his Son, Jesus Christ. And so we are reminded of that. We must first come face to face with who we are without God, before we can truly be blessed by God to the extent that He wants to bless us through His Son, Jesus Christ, through the man and the Son of God, Jesus Christ. I appreciate you studying this chapter along with me. Lord willing, next time, Jacob will meet up with Esau, and we'll find out what happens in the next chapter of the book of Genesis. But until then, I hope you have a good rest of your day.